Barbershop for sale. I talked to a barbershop owner who had been in the game for over 40 years. He was nearing retirement and wanted to sell his barbershop. I asked, "How much are you going to sell it for?" He replied, "I don't know." I followed up, "Well, how will you figure that out?" He said, "I have no idea." Meanwhile, a yoga studio sells their business for 260,000, a Pilates studio for 299,000, and a spin studio for 325,000. How do our neighbors in the fitness industry have a clear understanding of the worth of their business? What's the problem in the barber and beauty industry? If you look on websites like bizbuysell.com, you'll see barbershops and salons sell for much less. After 40 years of business, this shop owner had no idea what the business was worth and no idea how to figure it out. I heard the desperation and confusion in his voice. He felt lost, unsure what to do. Begin with the end in mind is a famous phrase from Stephen Covey's famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Picture this. You have built a well established business and someone reaches out to you and asks to buy your business. What number would you say? This is why bookkeeping matters. You need to know how to calculate the value of your business. So, how do you do this? To start, you need to know your numbers. Here are some basic definitions we should all know. Net income is the amount of money you have after expenses. Income minus expenses equals net income. Income is money made. Expenses are operating costs of doing business. A common rule of thumb to find a business valuation is to take your net income and multiply it by two, and then take your net income and multiply it by three. The value of your shop is often somewhere in between those two numbers. Don't get me wrong. I respect the OGs. I'm just concerned. Walk in cash only shops make me nervous. In 40 years, this barbershop owner probably served thousands of clients, but he had no record of it. No paper trail, no client email list, no proof of how busy that shop was. With all that cash, he was likely underreporting his income, which would affect the business evaluation. If he sells his shop, he might sell it for 20,000 if he's lucky, when he maybe could have got 200,000. This is why having an accountant matters. This is why your profit and loss statements matter. This is why your revenue report and your booking app matters. This is why knowing how many clients you have and what their average spend per visit matters. You can't evaluate your business if you don't know your numbers and have a paper trail to back it up. To be transparent, this isn't a theory for me. This is how I became a barbershop owner. Last summer, a local barbershop that had been in business for 30 years was up for sale. The broker evaluated the business based on the last 3 years of tax returns. Unfortunately, the tax returns showed very little profit, which lowered the price of the barbershop. In addition, it was a cash only walk in shop with no bookkeeping. There was no list of clients and no proof of how busy the barbers were. Fortunately for me, this significantly lowered the selling price. As OG barbers near retirement, this will continue to happen. Every city has an OG shop with an owner nearing retirement. Buying an existing shop from a retiring owner is a great opportunity for the next generation to step into ownership. It's also a great strategy for established shops to expand their brand and add more locations. Unfortunately for the OGs, but fortunate for the younger generation, I think barbershops will sell for a steal because the shop owner will have no idea the true value of their shop. In other words, it will sell for a fraction of what it is truly worth. If you're looking to own or expand, keep your eye out. Hello, welcome back to another episode of Beyond Barber School. This is a continuation of this mini series that I'll be doing in conjunction with BarberEVO. BarberEVO is a magazine that I am a featured columnist in, and they send out a column or a new edition every 2 months. So there's going to be 6 different editions this year, and they just released the it's the April, May 2025 that was just released, and I wrote a column that was called Barbershop for Sale. And so what I just did was I just read the column. Actually, that's how I've been starting this series is by reading the actual column from the magazine. And then here I'm going to expand a little bit on what I had written. I only get, 600 words or so in the column, and this it's really just the tip of the iceberg of my thoughts. And so I kind of start the conversation with the column in BarberEVO, and then this is kind of part two continuation where you can really hear all of my commentary on the topic. So uh, if you have BarberEVO, if you subscribe to BarberEVO, then maybe you've already read it. If you haven't, though, then you'll get a chance to hear it. Maybe not read the article, but you can hear it here in the podcast. Again, if you are interested in picking up BarberEVO, the subscription, you can pay for an annual subscription. It's actually $80 for your annual subscription. That's $10 off with the discount code of Doza, EVO, so DOZAEVO, and you'll get $10 off, and it'll cost $80 for an annual subscription. So, if you want the article in print or the column in print, along with reading some other columns of what's happening across the industry, I do recommend considering picking up BarberEVO. Okay, so I want to dive in though. Kind of how I structure these series is I have like the column literally right in front of me, and I'm gonna kind of just go through different components of it and just expand a little bit and share a little bit more of the story and a little bit more of my thoughts of what I meant, or expanding a little bit more on the ideas there. So we'll start from the top. To start this column, I actually referenced a story about a conversation I had with a barbershop owner who had been in the game for 40 years and was nearing retirement and was looking to sell the shop. So you might be wondering, how did this conversation come about? How did I meet this shop owner, and what are the details there? So this story is from when I worked with very popular, one of the most well-known booking management platforms or booking app platforms out there. It's a company called Squire. Some of you listening might use Squire, or maybe you're familiar with Squire. And so I worked for Squire in 2021. I was on their sales team, and what I did, I had a couple of positions with Squire. So being on their sales team, I would cold call barbershop owners across the country, the U.S. and Canada. I think primarily I was calling in the U.S. And so I cold call barbershop looking to talk to an owner, and I was essentially just looking to have conversations about what they were doing to manage, their business, to see if they were using a booking platform already. I was curious to hear what their experience was like with them, and if they were, considering maybe to make a change, or they weren't happy with their platform, then I could, talk about Squire and see if they might be a good fit. Or there were, in a lot of cases, there were shops like this where they were older shops, had been around for a while. They were walk-ins only. And I actually, I liked calling these shops because of conversations like this. And so I called this shop in particular, talked to the owner, and I think this shop's, if I remember correctly, they had, booth rental shop, and the owner was just giving the barbers their freedom of, doing whatever they wanted. So if they wanted to take appointments, they could. If they wanted walk-ins, they could just do that. If they wanted to use a booking app, they could. If they didn't want to, they didn't have to. Each barber could use their own. So one barber might be using Squire, and another barber could be using Booksy. Another barber could be using the Cut. Like, it was individual decisions for each independent booth renter. The owner was not mandating anything. And so the double-edged sword with that is leading into this conversation. And so when I would have a conversation with an owner like this, I would often ask them about their plans of retirement. So I would typically, say, what are you thinking? How many more years are you thinking about cutting? There's some barbers out there that are like, I'm cutting until the grave, which all the power and respect to them. You love it and you want to do it. I hope it's not just for financial scenarios where they're like, I have to work because I don't have retirement. saved. I hope it's more for just the love of it and serving your community as opposed to needing to do it to support your family. Uh, that's a side note of making sure barbers are saving for retirement and have a plan there so that they don't have to be behind the chair forever. But I often would ask the barber shop owner and kind of put him on the spot and just say, hey, like, I'm curious, what's your plans for retirement? Like, are you wanting to retire soon? And if so, what are you thinking about doing with the shop? And that's what, started this conversation. The shop owner was wanting to retire. And so I asked him, how much are you going to sell it for? And he had no idea. Asked him, how are you going to figure it out? And he didn't know. And when I said there was desperation and confusion in his voice, like it was real. I was talking to I think he was probably in his 70s. He's a 70-year-old man and unsure what his next step was with the business that he had owned for 40 years. And, you know, this is, I'd say, a large argument for why shops should have an online booking platform or a management platform because it makes it much easier to track, how many clients are actually in your database, how many appointments are being booked on average. You the platforms make it easy to give you the data to do a proper evaluation. And so in this scenario, when he doesn't have anything like that, he legitimately has no idea the numbers. So if someone was to come and say, well, how much money does the shop make? I don't think he knows the answer to that because in most cases, booth rental barbers are not submitting, how much money they made every single week. Um, there's no place that the owner can look to be like, well, so and so cuts X amount of clients every month, or he makes X amount of clients every month. Like there's just no data points. If someone was say, oh, how many clients do you serve on a month, weekly and monthly, annual basis? Like they don't know. So then it's like, okay, if you don't have those data points, then how do you evaluate the business? And so that's where I kind of talk about it later on is what happens when a business is being evaluated is they often will look at the tax returns. So, and this is what happened in the scenario that I had was to be more specific with how I bought my barbershop is the barbershop had been around for 30 years and the owner had sadly passed away. The owner hadn't been cutting though for about 10 years. So he stopped cutting 10 years, still had booth rental barbers at the shop. It was a walk-in, cash only shop. And so when the children went to, work with a broker to go sell the business, the broker came in who doesn't do a lot with the beauty industry, it didn't seem like. And so they're just coming in and running their typical formula to do evaluation. And what do they base that off of? Well, since there wasn't any online booking platform that had like data to look at, they like that's a huge disadvantage, right? So the broker had no idea how many clients does this business serve on a regular basis. So the only data point that they could go off of, which in general is one that is taken into account, is tax returns. So the owner had the business registered as a sole proprietor and they submitted, the tax returns for that sole proprietor, that individual. And so they pull the last 3 years tax returns to see the income of the business, the net income of the business, and it was very low, very, very low, which is not maybe surprising because in our industry, we do have a history of underreporting taxes. And so that's exactly what the scenario was I'm sure, you know, this barber was making more money than that, but that's not what the paper trail said. So now you're evaluating the business based on how much money is coming in, and if not a lot of money is coming in, at least there's proof of it, then the value of that business is going to be low. So this is where it kind of comes back around to kind of you know, bite you in the butt, so to speak, is you may have been quote unquote saving money on taxes throughout your career. But if you own that shop and if you're ever looking to exit and sell it for whatever reason, you're going to like that, however much money you actually reported does help. That's the calculation for how much your business is worth. So that's was probably one of my biggest arguments whenever I would talk to barbershop owners is I think having an online platform, a booking management platform makes that a lot easier for you. But regardless whether you want to do that or not, like the main thing is that you want to be strategic with the amount of money that you actually are reporting. And that's not just for selling your business, that's also for being bankable. I know Chris Basio likes to use that phrase of like you want to be bankable. What that means is if you go to the bank and you're trying to get a loan, if you're trying to get a car loan, if you're trying to get a loan for a house, they are going to be looking at, submit to us your tax returns for the last 3 years. That is what determines whether you might be eligible to get a loan or not. So if you're underreporting the amount of money you're making, the bank is not going to feel confident to loan you amount of money if you only make, $20,000 a year. Like you need to be making way more than that to show that you are someone that will actually pay back this loan. So it's beyond just hiding from Uncle Sam and not wanting to pay a lot in taxes. There's a strategy here, whether it's trying to be able to get a loan or it's maybe you're wanting to sell the business at some point. Now, I don't know how common this perspective is though in the industry because in a lot of cases I think when a barber decides to open up a barber shop, they're not thinking about wanting to sell it. That's probably not on their radar. They might be thinking, well, I'm opening a shop and I want the shop for life, like the shop's not going anywhere. But it's really, really important to think about worst case scenarios, even. So let's say, God forbid, something happens and you're actually not able to cut hair anymore. And you have to sell the business. What if there's like a family emergency or something? You end up having to move to a different city or move to a different state. You're not able to manage it anymore. And you're like, you know what? It's probably best for me to sell it. How much would you sell it for? And so preparing for that day and knowing that, you know what? I have a strategy or formula to be able to come up with that number. Now, who might be the one buying it? It could be a barber that's at your shop, someone who's renting a chair, someone that's on your team. They could be the one that's interested in buying it. It could be some investor or someone who maybe they're not a barber, but they like to own a barbershop. Like one thing I think is interesting about the franchise businesses, like your Supercuts and Sports Clips of the world, they're typically not owned by barbers or cosmetologists for that matter. They're owned by businessmen who are looking to own a business, a part of a successful franchise, and they're like, I want to go open up a Sports Clips. And so they're business people. They're not from the industry. And so who knows? That could be someone who wants to actually come and buy your barbershop. So all to say is I think it's so important to think about all of the scenarios, especially if you are in the position of owning a shop. Like there could be a day that comes where you have to sell your shop, whether you want to sell it or whether you don't want to sell it. A scenario could come and you're going to sell it. And you need to be prepared for that. And being prepared for that will look like how much money over the last 3 years did you submit on your tax returns to show how much money the business is bringing in? That will be a key into the formula of coming up with that number. If the business is only showing, you know, X amount, it's lower than what the actual number is, and maybe you've been claiming a ton of write-offs, or you've been, not reporting all the cash that's coming in, then your valuation, you're probably going to sell it for much less. So, anyways, be thinking about that, because that worst case scenario thinking, I think, is really really important. So I know I just went on a huge tangent and I just am talking about the first section. I touched on some other parts, but I want to talk about the second part where I'm talking about a yoga studio, a Pilates studio, and a spin studio. Yoga studio sells for 260,000, Pilates studio for 299, and a spin studio for 325. I'm not making these numbers up. So I've maybe mentioned this before, but I also have a background in working in boutique fitness. So I started my sales career at a company called MindBody. MindBody is an online booking management platform. They're kind of the pioneers when it comes to online booking. I worked with them in 2012 to 2014 when I was actually a college student at Cal Poly. MindBody was headquartered in San Luis Obispo. And I'll just say I started my career there selling into fitness studios, dance studios, salons. I was cold calling barbershops at that time. And trust me, all of them were hanging up on me because no one was really thinking about online booking at that time, which is very wild to think about how the industry has evolved over the last 15 years since that time. Um, but where I got these numbers from is I was the director of sales for a boutique fitness platform called Mariana Tech. Most recently, I worked with them for 3 years. And I went to a conference in Los Angeles. And one of the workshops that I attended at this conference was all about basically helping these owners of these fitness studios think about the valuation of their business. And this guy, his name's Mitch. He's like the boutique fitness broker .com is his website. He helped businesses think through how to evaluate. And so what he does is his role is actually a broker for boutique fitness studios. Now it's in the name. Where if a yoga studio is looking to actually sell their business, he comes in and is the broker and helps them evaluate and helps them like find a buyer. And so these numbers actually came from his website where he'll have different businesses that are for sale, and he like lists out what that price is. And so it's interesting. I've always seen the fitness industry and beauty industry being like they're like neighbors, I'd say. Uh, and I saw that when I was working for MindBody. They were serving the fitness industry, the wellness industry, the beauty industry. They're all kind of in the same world, obviously very different communities. But I just thought it's so interesting. How is it that a yoga studio or Pilates studio can sell for $300,000 and they've only been in business for like 5 years or maybe 10 years? But a barbershop that's been around for 40 years is selling for like 20 or $30,000. How is it that a yoga studio is selling 10 times the amount of a barbershop or a salon? Like, make it make sense. And I think part of it is because our industry has a history of underreporting. And so they're not thinking about exiting. Whereas a yoga studio owner or Pilates studio owner, they could be thinking about exiting. They could be thinking, yeah, I'm going to start this Pilates studio, I'm going to build it up, and then I'm going to sell it. Or one of these large, maybe Pilates franchises might want to come and acquire it or buy it. I think they're thinking about this Stephen Covey quote that I mentioned, begin with the end in mind. The end could mean selling your business, right? It could. Now, it could not. It could, sure, the end might be, no, I want to start this barbershop and it's going to be a generational barbershop. I'm passing it on to my kids and it's going to pass on to their kids and their kids' kids. It's like, okay, well, let's talk about that then. because that's exactly what the scenarios that I had was barbershop owner, pass it on to his kids. And this is, I hate to say it's sad, but it is. This feels sad. Is I'm sure the kids, I call them kids, but they're obviously grown, like, they got their own grandkids or kids themselves, grandkids themselves. They probably were like, oh, dad's got his barbershop. He's owned it for 40 years. You know, God forbid when he does pass, we could have the opportunity to own it and run it, and or we could sell it, and that might be part of their inheritance, right? Inheriting this business and then figuring out what they want to do with it. You know how surprising it was to only sell it for how much they sold it for? And it's interesting, right? And you know what? I've been going back and forth whether I want to actually share the number of what I bought it for. And I think I do want to share it. I haven't shared it publicly, but I'm going to share it here right now because I think it illustrates the problem. I'll take a second. How much you think I sold it for? Think about it. Get the number in your head. Come up with it. All right. You ready? I bought my barbershop for $10,000. $10,000. A shop that had been around for 30 years was sold for $10,000. I found it on bizbuysell.com. I go on there and I'll just search, barbershop or hair salon that's for sale. And sure enough, it came up, and the shop was a 30-minute drive away from where I live. I honestly thought that it was a scam. When I saw the listing, I thought it was a scam because a 30-year-old, any business that's been around for 30 years being sold for $10,000 just felt confusing to me. Like, how is that even possible? And so I looked into it. I applied, put in my application. I'm like, what's the worst thing that can happen? I'd never done this before, but, created an account in Biz by Sell. I applied to try to talk to the owners, and they got back to me. And then I had to kind of submit some more details about who I am as a buyer and my buyer profile. And, fortunately for me, obviously, if you're listening to this, you might have seen my platform. And so I, have this podcast. I am an educator, have my website, and I've written a lot. And so I did have a somewhat impressive resume because a lot of the other owner or other people that applied, I think there were 10 other applicants. My applicant is the one that stood out. And part is because I think they'd gone to my website, and the brokers who were selling it mentioned, they were like, we went to your website. We love what you do. I actually listen to your podcast. Like, it's kind of crazy that I stood out because of everything that I've kind of done with my online platform, which is definitely a full circle moment. But all that to say is I applied Biz by Sell. And then from there, we went through the process of me understanding more about the business. And I was trying to poke holes at why is it being sold for $10,000? Like, let me, try to wrap my head around it. Again, it was an operating barbershop. Some more details about it is there's actually a barbershop in the front, and in the back there is a salon. So on the unit or on the lease, the lease is all under my name, and the salon is actually subleasing from me. So I was technically buying the barbershop, but also like taking over the rights to the whole lease. So I did not buy the building. People ask me that. No, that did not be the building, but I essentially was taking over the rights to the lease, and I was buying all of the assets inside of the shops, like the barber chairs, the stations, like the furniture, etc. All of that was part of the sale. Other things that are interesting to that process is, when a business is a sole proprietor, you actually I actually wasn't buying a business. Like, I wasn't buying a legal entity. You can't buy a legal entity that's a sole proprietor. You could only buy like a LLC or an S corp. So me taking over the shop, it was like it was really more of an asset sale, and me betting on the fact that a shop that's been around for 30 years, like, how do I evaluate that? Yeah, it's hard to do a valuation for that, and they had no client list, so I didn't know how busy the shop was. I didn't know how many clients had would come in on a day-to-day basis because it was a walk-in cash only shop. And so I was really, taking a bet that it was going to be doing it would do well. So I shared this, buying something for $10,000, put that in perspective. I bought a business that had been around for 30 years for like less the cost of like a used car around it, I mean, some used cars are obviously less than that, but all in after, needing to put in the security deposit and like first month's rent along with some fees, call it 15,000 just to be safe. But the listing price was 10,000. So I've shared this story to lots of different people. A lot of people that are outside of the barbering industry, actually, I typically will ask them what they think. And some people are like throwing out, "Oh, you probably bought it for 500,000." Or some people have been like, "Oh, you bought it for 300,000." Or people will be like, "Oh, you probably had to take out a loan for that if it's been around for 30 years." Little do they know, I tell them like $10,000. They're like, "No way." Like, what? It's confusing. And but it's not. It's confusing, but it's not. Because when you think about the history again of our industry, underreporting taxes, trying to hide from Uncle Sam, not putting how much money the business is actually bringing in, that will drive down the valuation of the business. So that's where I'm concerned for the OGs. I love the OGs. I respect the OGs, but I'm concerned because if they're in this scenario, then and they want to sell it, they're not going to they're probably not going to get a lot of money a lot of money for it. It could probably sell for 10, 20, 30,000, something in that range. This whole piece on where do I see the industry going is there's um there's someone I listen to, some of y'all might be seeing her. Her name's Cody Sanchez. She talks a lot about actually buying small businesses in America. She recently wrote a book. I haven't read it, but definitely binge watched some of her YouTube videos at different times, and I'm on her newsletter that talks a lot about strategies on buying small businesses. I think what's going to happen is as the baby boomers retire, as these barbers that are in their 70s and up, these OG barbershops that have been in your city forever, right? That generation is nearing retirement. And they are probably asking the question, what am I going to do with it? Who is going to take it over? Needing to think about a number of how much are they going to sell it for. The chances are going to be there's a barber that's in that shop. They might be the successor, right? They could have kids that they pass on the ownership to. But what happens if their kids don't want it and there is no barber at their shop that wants it? What's going to happen? Or there's a OG shop that's a one chair shop. One barber in the 70s nearing retirement. What are they going to do? There's a book that was by a guy named Rob Hammer. He's a photographer, and maybe you've seen it. It's called Barbershops of America. He traveled across the US and he took pictures of all of these old barbershops across America. And he posted something the other day, and I actually commented on it, and it was this old barber that I think had passed away, I want to say, and he was posting the photo as just like a, rest in peace to this barber. I think he had found out that he passed. And I think I commented, I was like, I'm so curious about all these barbershops that you've taken pictures of across America. Like, what's happening with them now? Like, do you know? Like, have you ever followed up to see what's up with them? And he mentioned a lot of the barbers have either passed away or a lot of the barber shops had shut down because no one took them over. And I think that is the case of our industry right now. Is I'm so curious what is going to happen to these shops that have been around for 30, 40, 50 years as this generation retires. And I think the opportunity here is for if you are a younger barber or maybe not a younger barber. You're just a barber and you're looking to open a shop, or you want to own a shop. You could start one from scratch, brand new, do your whole build out, buy your, find a space, build it out, all you. That's one option. Another option could be to take over a barbershop, right? There's one that's been there forever and buy it and step into ownership, right? That's another option. And I think that option is, how do I say it? I think that's the one that we'll start to see more of. It could look like a brand new, it could look like an owner coming in and taking over an existing shop and not changing the name at all. Like you keep the name of the shop, you keep the legacy of the shop going. It's just a swap of ownership. It could be someone coming in and wanting to rebrand it, right? It could look like a shop that is adding another location, right? Adding their second location, third location, fourth or fifth location, right? And there's validation because it's if this barbershop has been here for 30, 40 years, then you know that there's a clientele that's been going there. And I'll never forget my shout out to my barber instructor, Andre, when I was in school and I was in the process of figuring out where I wanted to work. I did a lot of research and I literally had a spreadsheet that had every single barbershop in my city. I had one column that was like average price of their haircut or the cost of their haircut. And then I did research to figure out how much their booth rent was I think I asked the barbers that were there or barbers of barbers who knew someone that worked there. So I did the research, found roughly how much money each booth rent was. And then I took into consideration like how long has the shop been open? That was another column. Like, has it been around for less than 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? I took into account online booking. Do they have online booking? Is that an option? Is it walk in only? Cash card? Another one was location. Where are they located? Are they downtown? Parking? Is it free parking? Is it paid parking? I had all of these different variables trying to figure out where to work. And in this conversation, there was this one shop that was an old shop, one of the oldest shops in town. And I remember talking to Andre about it. And Andre was like, a good place to work at is a shop where the people in the city could close their eyes and walk down the street and straight into the barbershop because everyone in the city knows that where that barbershop is and they've gone in there so many times. I thought it was an interesting illustration because this is the idea of, connection to a community. Uh, and those barbershops that everyone knows, is there, those are those cornerstone staples of the community. And they can be great places for you to, start building as a new barber because they've just been around for so long and they're not going anywhere. I think that I hope, right, that these OG shops, these cornerstones of the community, I just hope they don't go away. You know, they've served communities for a long time. I think we owe it to the community to keep these shops around and to honor the legacy, not to come in and completely change everything about them, but to actually come in and honor the ones that came before you, honor the shop's legacy. Because it's really a loss, I think, to the community if these shops go away. So, you know, I think at the heart of it is we'd love to see these shops stay in these communities and at the same time have it be a win-win. Like the barbershop owner that helped build up this shop, they deserve to get paid for it, right? Like depending on their retirement setup, this could be a significant bump into their retirement. We're talking from 20,000 to 200,000 maybe. Like now is the buyer going to buy it 200,000 cash? Probably not. Maybe depending on the investor, but they might be a payment plan, right? Yeah, they have to take out a loan to pay for that 200,000 or you do seller financing or something like through the seller. There's different creative ways to purchase businesses and there's people like Cody Sanchez who kind of educate on what that can look like. But I just hope that there's a world where, you know, the owner sells a shop for amount of money that is the true value of the business. And I think we are selling ourselves short when we under report. That doesn't help the case of understanding the true value. So, I mean, I picture a world where a shop owner ends up selling their business and feels great about the amount of money that they sold it for. And the buyer also feels great about the deal that they got and they feel like they're paying the appropriate amount of money for it. So it's unfortunately for the OGs, fortunately for the younger generation, is what I wrote about in the article. But I really hope that moving forward, it will be, fortunately for the OGs and fortunately for the younger generation. I think the reality of where we are is these shops will likely sell for a fraction of the price. And that is just because when you look at the tax returns and what's on the paper, there is no paper trail. It's limited. Will be interesting to see how ownership changes as time goes on, especially as these baby boomers retire. I think an action step that you can take right now is, pull up Google Maps and just search barbershop in your city and see how many there are, but specifically look for the ones that have been around for the longest. You know, uh, maybe maybe if you're looking to own a shop, it could be worth you going in there, getting a haircut, talking to the owner, introducing yourself to the owner, and asking them, "Hey, what do you think about doing when you retire? Are you going to sell the shop? Like, what? I'm curious. What are you thinking? How much how much you going to figure out how to sell it for?" Right? This kind of comes back to the questions that I asked when I was working for Squire calling these barbershops. All right. Those are some thoughts. I kind of went off a little bit differently, but I think I covered everything that's in this article or in the column. Again, if you'd like to pick it up in person, you can have an annual subscription for just $80. You just got to use the code Doza EVO DOZA EVO when you go buy it at barberevo.com. If you thought this was interesting, please start a conversation with me. You either leave a review, uh, and I can see your comments there. Send me an Instagram message. I actually had someone message me the other day. They listened to one of my podcasts and they really resonated with them, and we literally ended up getting on a phone call and we talked for over an hour. So I'm not promising that I'll do that with everyone, but I'm serious. If I share these thoughts in here in this long form podcast, and if you want to talk about any of the things I've shared, please send me a message. You can DM me on Instagram at Barber Doza. Would love your thoughts on this conversation of barbershops being for sale, and yeah, hopefully we'll get a chance to connect with some of you. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode of Beyond Barber School. I'm your host, Barber Doza. We'll see you next time.